Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of MCP Dev Days. I'm one of your hosts today, Katie Savage, here with Mark Biza, and we're super thrilled to have you back for another awesome day of some deep technical content all around MCP. We have a ton of folks joining from all over the world, so whether it's morning, evening, afternoon for you, we're super thrilled to have you here. Seen a couple of folks tuning in from India.
Yeah, it looks like we even got some folks from Singapore.
And a couple who are my neighbors in San Diego. So great to see you, San Diego.
John A. Acosta here asked, day 2, what did I miss yesterday? Well, don't worry, because day 1 is live right now on the MS Developer channel. So after this event, you can go hop on to the live videos and see everything that we had from day 1. Katie, what was some of the favorite things you saw?
So there were a ton of awesome sessions in day 1, and a ton of our community members and partners joined us as well. I think my favorite session was actually from Chris Noring. Top of the day, he was talking about all of the MCP features in VS Code and did quite a marathon there. I was super impressed, and also I learned a lot of new things.
Yeah,
how about you?
100%. It was great seeing Chris accelerate his productivity with MCP and VS Code. I really liked some of the more conceptual topics. For example, the auth conversation that Den had with Aaron from Okta and Darren from AWS. They're super knowledgeable about how to secure your MCP servers, and we're going to see some of that in action today in day 2. Den's going to be coming on with guests from arcade.dev to show you how to build secure MCP servers. So super excited about that one. One more session I wanted to call out was a session by RV Gua, who talked about NL Web, something I hadn't really known too much about. But NL Web is basically imagining of how an agentic web would look like. And so I thought the concepts around that session were pretty cool to learn about. So
yeah, definitely. And thank you all for all of your awesome questions for our speakers and presenters. Please keep them coming today. You can either do that on the YouTube stream or by using hashtag MCP Dev Days. But we've talked enough about yesterday and all the amazing sessions that you can check out right now. But Mark, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, 100%. We're going to kick off the day with Burke Holland coming on, vibe coding his first local MCP server. We're also going to show you a little bit of the C# SDK, show you how agent-to-agent communication works in MCP, and then also end the day with connecting MCPs into agents that you build using the Azure AI Foundry agent service. So we have a full slate. Today's all for the builders, and we're going to show you how to go from 0 to hero with MCP.
Yeah. And before we dive into any of that amazing content, we do have some exciting demos coming to you from this keynote.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to start out with showing how you build an MCP server using Azure Functions. We're going to transition into how you secure that MCP server using API management. And there's going to be some cool demos coming from our folks here, Julia and Matthew.
Yeah. All right. I think that's enough from us, Mark. Should we kick it over to him?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's kick it over to the table.
Hi, I'm Matthew Henderson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia.
We're both product managers on the app platform team. I represent Azure Functions and App Service.
And usually we take it the next step and we make it to production. So I'm Julia. I'm product manager working in API management.
Yep. So we're going to be building a remote MCP server, and there's a whole session on remote MCP later today, so please check that out. But it's really great because we're going to make sure that we have multiple agents able to talk to something that's updated and consistent across the entire operations. So let's just dive right in. I'm here in VS Code, and I have a C# project where C# is my preferred stack of choice. And so the first thing we're going to do, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing my project there. There, great, perfect. Sorry. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have the right extensions in place. Just get our dependencies in order. So Azure Functions has an extension available in preview that brings in a bunch of MCP capabilities. For .NET, I'm going to reference that via this NuGet package. But if I wanted to write in, say, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, or Python, I would just make sure I update my extension bundle to use the preview bundle. Once I have that in place, we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start looking at the scenario I've built out here. Really quickly, we've done just Git and saving snippets, where I'm going to take a code snippet, make it available to be reused later. The way I've done that is I have a standard Azure function here with an MCP tool trigger. that trigger is going to give me some context, but importantly, it's going to take the name of the tool and a description that lets the agent know exactly when to call it. Similarly, I have to define arguments, things that are passed in, and we use MCP tool properties for that. So in the exact same way, I have a name being passed in, a description, and a type. And so in this scenario, I've got a name, so what I'm calling this thing, and the actual code of the snippet itself. The function itself is very simple. All I'm doing is returning that to go through a blob output binding. And so this is the nice thing about Azure Functions, right, is that I'm abstracting everything away and focusing just on the code that I need, which is really just the context around this server. That output is going to go to a JSON file that's going to be named based on the snippet name property. So we're going to actually use the actual tool arguments to reference the snippet name, and then we'll save it there. I also have to get it back out. So what I'm going to do is have another function that similarly just defines itself, but you'll notice that this doesn't have any tool properties. I'm still pulling in the blob using the exact same path structure, but I'm just returning it. Nothing too fancy here. The way I've defined this one is actually in the program CS and using a builder approach. So here we can see that we can do the exact same type of thing where we provide all the metadata of property name, property description, and type, and configure it from the builder here. It's mostly a matter of preference in terms of which way you go, but the attributes in the function parameters is really nice if I'm going to be using those directly. If I want to use the builder approach, maybe that's because I have a large number of properties, right? Or I'm reusing properties across different tools. So it's a very quick way of getting it going, but let's see it in action. I'm going to go ahead and start debugging here, and we can go ahead and set a breakpoint while we're at it. And while that gets going, we're going to use GitHub Copilot in order to actually work with our MCP tool. So I have an MCP JSON actually configured in my VS Code folder, so we'll go ahead and get that pulled up. And you'll see I have two servers here. One is going to be a remote one we'll look at later, and the other is a local. So you'll see that I have now in my output window a endpoint defined and the two functions loaded. So we can go ahead and start this server. And there's actually, this should be loaded already, but something that I think is really handy in VS Code, and one of the things I really like about building out my MCP servers here, is it's really easy to actually look at the output. So something you should do is show output for your server, and then make sure to set it to at least debug level, because then you'll be able to see all the different calls that are actually coming in from the MCP protocol. So we can actually see the list tools call had a result here. And I can see that I have all of the input schema defined from those tool properties. And actually you can see that I have all these properties are required as well. That's the default for this version of the extension. So we're ready to go. Everything seems to be good here, and I'm ready to debug. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just grab the contents of program CS. And I'm going to say, save this as a snippet named my snippet. So GitHub Copilot will then use its reference to that MCP server that we've configured, ask me, do I have permission to make this call? And then I'll be able to send it. So I can see that it's going to this server that we've defined. It has the parameters being passed in, so we're good to go. I can certainly make sure I allow it always in the session, but right now we'll just give it a run once. Oh, there's our breakpoint. We can just continue past that. And in theory, this should be saved perfectly. Great. So now let's actually see retrieving it. So let's create a new file. Actually, let's just leave it here. And then let's have it, let's add the code from my snippet. But something I'm going to do here is sometimes the Copilot doesn't necessarily know that it needs to use the tool, or you might have input your descriptions wrong or things like that. So something that's really handy is make sure to use the hashtag octothorpe, whatever you want to call it, and £, and you can actually start putting the context in for your tools. So here I'm going to just explicitly say, hey, let's use the git snippet from the local MCP server so that it knows for sure that that's what it needs to do. And we should see that added back into this file. Yep, great. So this is a quick little example of how we got it working. We're able to do this inner loop development, set our breakpoints, debug, see everything coming through in VS Code. I mean, we can see that it's actually retrieving the response here. And so we're good to go. That's a local MCP server, but we're trying to build remote here. So just running it on my dev box is not really going to be sufficient, right? So what we need to do instead is deploy it to prod. I've already gone ahead and done so. Sorry, wrong window. Here I have the function app that's deployed on the Flex consumption plan. It's the exact same set of functions. And I'm going to need its URL, and I'm going to need a key by default just to help protect me as I'm getting started. This MCP extension key. So we'll grab that, and then I can plug it in. I have it defined already as inputs here on the MCP JSON. So we're good to go, passing in that key here. We can go ahead and start this function. Go ahead and stop this server as well. And so now I can do the exact same thing. So let's, we're in a different context. Let's use this snippet tool here. And I'm just going to go back and say, save this as a snippet, name my snippet. Now, hopefully this is going to pick the remote MCP server, but there's a chance that it'll still think it has the local. And that's another case where, yeah, see, there we go. So it thinks it's going to be trying to do it to local. That's not going to work because we just stopped that server. So what we need to do is the exact same thing I showed you just a moment ago. Make sure to do the save snippet, and we can see two options. We'll make sure it's using the remote, and now it should do what we expect. Perfect. So it's using the remote MCP server. We've got it going. Go ahead and let it run. So very quickly, we've gotten ourselves, with very little actual code, we've managed to get an MCP server up and running. But the beautiful thing about that is it's going to scale really well for us. So let's go ahead and just take a look in App Insights. We can see because we've just started using it, we already have a server online, so we're good to go. I want to throw some load at it though. I've got a quick little script here written using the C# SDK for MCP. There's a session on that later today. Please check that out. But this is just going to create a bunch of clients and start hitting this just so that we can start seeing it actually scale out a bit. So the Flex consumption plan is going to throw a few servers at it immediately because it sees that we're getting a spike, and then it'll probably level off. But you can see we're already back up to 2 servers online, and we can kind of see that they're both interacting with things periodically. What's really nice here is, we're not guaranteed that any given client or any given message is going to land on the same server as the previous. And that's something that we're able to handle for you in the background. We're managing session state and things like that so that you're really not focused on those particulars of, taking your MCP server to full robust scale. That's handled. You're just focusing on the logic of the tool itself, and then you're good to go. So that's a quick run through of how we can build a server very quickly using Azure Functions. If you want to learn more, please check out our Learn documentation for the preview binding. And if you have any issues or feedback, we're also on GitHub. Please reach out. And now we're going to take what we've just learned. We're going to take that server and we're going to do a lot more with it. Julia?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Matthew, so much. Really loved how you showed in under 10 minutes how you went through your inner loop, you built a remote MCP server with 2 tools, and then you deployed it to your Azure function as a first step. But now from there, that's usually where we as Azure API Management come in. We talk to enterprises, but also to a lot of developers who now want to take it to production. They want to take it a further step, right? So before we take it to production, what are some of the very common themes we see right now? So first of all, this is a huge growing ecosystem in the local MCP space, but also in the remote MCP space. And it's super exciting, right? And thousands of MCP servers are being built, and they are available today and are exposed on different platforms. Which is great, and we definitely love our community out there. Especially when we talk to, or I talk to enterprise customers or even developers, this usually comes with immediate questions around security, because if you have such a fast speed of growing an ecosystem, we usually get questions around, hey, I'm actually exposing something to an agent that now has hands-on access to either sensitive data about your system. What about mission-critical operations? So the question around how do we secure it properly becomes very, very important for a lot of our developers and enterprises out there. But then also, even from a more enterprise scale, is MCPs are super powerful, but how can you make sure within your organization MCP servers are being consumed in a right way? What is the inventory that they can start looking at before you're starting just to pick up any random MCP server that you find out there? So you truly want to take it to the next level. So with this being said, what Matthew has shown us, right? So on one side, you used Azure Functions to deploy your remote MCP server. You used the Model Context Protocol to talk to your MCP host or your MCP client. So what now if you have not just an MCP server hosted in Azure Functions? What if you start to scale? What if you have different MCP servers being built? What if you now suddenly also have third-party MCP servers as well? What do you do as an organization? What are some things that you have to consider? And then maybe also as a developer or even as an enterprise, you've built APIs for years now. Now we have MCP servers, which are not the same as APIs, but there are a lot of similarities. So we get a lot of these questions, well, how do you now actually take it into production? And this is where Azure API Management, our AI gateway, comes in. You can use API Management to transform your APIs. So we recently announced that build that you can put or you can transform any existing API into a remote MCP server. And we have a session later today that is actually going to go into step-by-step detail how you can do that. We also now have support on API management side. You can bring your remote MCP server, regardless if it's built on Azure Function ACA, and you can put it into API management and you can start applying the same familiar things that you have done for years now in the API space now to remote MCP servers as well. In addition to that, API management is there to protect. So OAuth 2, and we know the spec is changing, and Dan has a session later on it today as well, is you can use our safety policies to start applying the OAuth 2 policies on top of your remote MCP server, so it works in a way that makes it secure and safe.
You don't have to rely on that key I was using earlier, right?
Exactly. We are also more. We are there to protect, observe. So we have logs and metrics, especially if you're curious of what are some of the things that are going on with your remote MCP server from an enterprise organization. Who are all of the people out there? What if something fails? What can we do? So logging in metrics or observability is very important as well. And then last but not least is the control of your remote MCP server. You can use API management as your traffic shield. So we have certain traffic policies like rate limiting, all of these things that you can put on top of your remote MCP server to make sure that whatever you're using within your enterprise or even as a developer, you should put this in place in between to make it secure overall. So now that we talked about protect, observe, and control, right? So how do I as an organization start to manage all of these different remote MCP servers that suddenly started to come, even if it's internally built or we already talked about the third-party MCP servers as well? So yesterday, Jay, in his keynote, announced that we offer Azure API Center as a private enterprise registry. And you can go right now to mcp.azure.com to see an example and experience what this might look like. Right now, we have a lot of public MCP registry that are being built, and this is great because this is how the community is innovative. If we are seeing and learning from the community, as especially an enterprise, there is a need for a private registry, something you want to build within your organization to make sure whatever my internal developers are consuming is something we approve on. So with this being said, let me switch over to our mcp.azure.com, and I can explain a little bit in detail what we did there and how I actually did this. So as I've mentioned, this is all built and powered by Azure API Center. Azure API Center is part of the API management service offering we have here at Microsoft. So it actually belongs to Azure API Management. So if you're already an Azure API Management customer, perfect, you can start using it for free right now. We also have a free tier. So you can just, whatever you see right here, you can actually go and build yourself within your organization. So what did I do here? This is a developer portal. This is a registry, right? So we started to list a bunch of different MCP servers here. I wanted to make sure that I'm showing some local ones that I added to my MCP center. I also wanted to show some of the remote ones as well. Something very exciting, over the last couple of weeks, we worked with a bunch of partners together who were willing to give us access to their remote MCP server and said, hey, together with Microsoft, we want to drive this a community of MCP servers. So we started to engage with them, and they are now part of our Azure ecosystem here at Microsoft. All right, so last but not least, one of the items here I have is endpoints. So what does it mean, right? So before I'm going to talk about the endpoint here a little bit more in detail, let me show you how I went ahead and built this. So as I mentioned, this is all powered and built upon Azure API Center. So that's the Azure API Center that I've built this developer portal or this registry on top of it. You can see here's my list of the different MCP servers that I put in here. Under the discovery page, you can now find the partners that I mentioned we are partnering with, that we've worked with. And this is right now pointing to a public endpoint that Neo and Atlassian and all of these great partners are putting out there and are wanting to provide for our developer community to get started. As an enterprise organization, we talked about this. I actually want to put an AI gateway in between. So what I did here is I connected my API Center to an Azure API Management service. So now once I start registering this public endpoint, this public remote MCP server, it's not just registering it in my registry, it actually puts it behind an AI gateway, it puts it behind API management. So let me show you what this looks like. I'm now in Azure API Management. Under the MCP server page, you can now find I registered the Microsoft Learn endpoint behind a gateway, and it's now pointing to this endpoint instead of the public one. I took this one and I brought it back. As I mentioned, it will automatically also register it, of course, in API Center itself as well. And let me explain a little bit how we can now make this public to our developer audience. And this is where the concept of metadata comes in. I'm able to define certain criteria, and a lot of these things should look very familiar, like categories was something that we saw on the public website, right? Or endpoint, or also visibility. Because what I can do here is, via my APIs tab here, if I now go into the Microsoft Learn one that I've now put behind an AI gateway, and if I added the visibility tag, and right now it's set to false because first I want to make sure that everything is set in place. Now if I switch this to true, and if I save it, I can now go back to my MCP website here, to my developer portal, and if I refresh it, it will now show the endpoint that I just added to my registry. So now my developers internally are able to see this, they are able to find it. And if I even open this here, I wanted to make it easy for them to start consuming it. They can copy the endpoint, or they can just hit the install in VS Code button, which will open it here and which will guide me to my VS Code. Me as a developer, I now only have to click the install button. Let's start the server. It's running now, it's working, and it's put behind an AI gateway. So that's why you can see the URL not pointing to the public one, but actually pointing to the one that I put behind my API management gateway. If you want to learn more about this, we have a session later today where we are talking about all of these a little bit more in detail. Just kind of wanted to teaser this. I definitely recommend checking out our Azure mcp.azure.com website. And in my later session, I am going to give a little bit more details how I actually went ahead and built this with this being said, let's see if there are any questions and hand it back to Mark and Katie.
Thanks, Julia. It was amazing seeing you put MCP server behind a gateway. There are a couple questions here. We only have time for one, so we'll jump right to it. So this question says, hello, devs. My understanding of MCP servers was that we create it locally in our own custom tools for our agents. But it seems like every company is developing their own, like an API endpoint. Do you guys have thoughts about the local versus remote situation here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, check out the remote MCP session later on. The nice thing about remote MCP servers is that you can update them in place while they're being consumed by a variety of things. So again, putting it behind management, I can make sure consistently in my organization, everyone that's consuming it from any client, any agent, is getting the exact same thing as we roll out new changes, as we update data sources, as we, even in some cases, keep state associated with those servers. So it's a really handy way of making something like that happen. But, local is also great for, just getting things going. It's really good for dev utilities and things like that too. It's just a question of, what the needs of the organization are. How do you go forward with it? And how do you make sure that you're governing things in the way that you want?
Yeah, totally. I would also say it depends on the use case. Some MCP servers are meant to be local versus other ones might be something that you want to start thinking about remote because it's easy to accessible because it's a public or it's hopefully a private endpoint, right? But some of them definitely will stay local. Some of them we now see moving to the remote space as well.
Great. Totally makes sense. And also sounds like we need to stay tuned for your session later. So
Yeah.
Thank you both so much.